Hello, this is Brenda Luther, and I'm trying to do a concise, short, brief interview or webinar on Task 3 for SK2 in Literature Review. I've got the homepage of our course community loaded, and if you haven't been here, this is a great place to be. This webinar is here, so hopefully you got two other webinars on topics are here, but most importantly, the study guides for all of our tasks are here. So I'm going to open this study guide now, and we will start talking about SK2, the final task in the literature review. I've got task stream open, and this is the third task where you bring everything together and talk about your topic. And so I will review some of the stumbling blocks of this. First, notice in the study guide I do chat a bit. This study guide's been updated to match the task that's been continually updated. The basics is that you've performed a literature research to guide and focus your literature review, and you're going to write that now. Describe your problem. This comes from your previous tasks where you keep building on describing your problem and an introduction of your problem. You certainly can move this work forward in every task because you're investigating the same problem. Then part B, they do want to see your 10 sources that you're going to use. You can put them right here, or you also put them at the end of the paper. Has a reference page, but your references may have additional things in these 10 sources. So make sure that the reviewers know what you're listing has your evidence that you're using. And then you go to this part C. This is the heart of your literature review. These are the 10 sources that you're using, and you want to bundle them together. I give you an example about if you wanted to share with me these 10 pieces of evidence. They were really important, and you said, here's the first article, and it said this, and here's the second one, and it says this. I would be asleep, I would be bored, or I would forget by the third article. So we don't present it like that. We present them in topics, and I give you an example about if I were doing a topic of childhood obesity, and I may say that 3 pieces of evidence are being presented. One is family environment promoting obesity, physical activity to prevent it, school interventions to treat it. So then those are how my 10 pieces might organize, and I would take those pieces apart and present them. Now, after you take those pieces apart and present them, your groups have factors, barriers, and best practices that are similar. So I would present the factors related to family environment, the barriers, the best practices, what we know from this evidence. Not what I know from my thoughts or my knowledge, but what the evidence is telling us. I would present on these 3 topics. I think a great way to help you see this is to go to the Capstone Archives. This Capstone Archives are on the WGU Resources tab. You see the exemplary capstones and a comprehensive as well. So I'm pulling up Mary Carney's. She was a graduate in 2012. I met Mary while she was working on her courses, and additionally got to know Mary afterwards because she's a dynamo. And I know she'd be thrilled that we were using her capstone as an example, because I just want you to see what they look like, what you're physically presenting. So this is Mary's capstone. You can start your papers looking like this. These are capstone examples, but you don't have to until you get to capstone, but they're going to eventually look like that. And she has an abstract. I'll shrink that down a little bit for her so you can see that it's totally one page. Typically abstracts are under 200 words, 250 words, 150 words. Depends on what your journal or your paper says you need to. Mary's is an unstructured abstract. I'd like to show you an example of a structured abstract. I kind of like structured abstracts better because they let people quickly refer to the sections. So you can see in this one they had a background section, they had a methodology section, results and conclusions. So you will write an abstract in eventually. I'm trying to find now where I put Mary's paper. Let's see. Let's go back. Where did her paper go? I guess I have to open it up again, don't I? I'll not do that again so I can stay on her paper. So her abstract and her acknowledgments. These are, and here's a table of contents. This is something you'll explore in SK2. But this is what you will have within Part A becomes an introduction of the problem, your chapter 1, and you know she has a heading there, introduction. She introduces her problem. Her problem was very interesting. It was about night shift workers and what night shift does to us physically, emotionally, and this disruption of circadian rhythms. Very interesting study, and she published on this and actually has put forth another research proposal that she's doing in Indiana now with more investigation of it. But she states her problem statement in her introduction, and then she even states her research questions, so what she was focusing on. The rationale and significance for the study, I kind of want you to ignore all these headings. You'll be guided to them in Capstone, but just so that you see what she's doing here in an introduction. She had a complex topic, so she chose to define some of the terms so that people, when they were reading, would not be confused. And at the end of her introduction, she had a summary. Now here is what SK2 Task 3 is all about, writing a literature review. So notice Mary introduced, again, the literature review, not the topic. She introduced what's going on in her literature review, what she wanted to explore. So she tells us the following 4 sections summarize the research findings on the broad topic of circadian disruption. So her first heading was on human chronobiology. So we understood what's going on with normal sleep cycles, what's happening in sleep cycles. And she starts to introduce that healthcare disrupts those. So then she goes into what's the evidence that we know now about the disruption of circadian rhythms and its risk. She had subheadings underneath here, the physical risks, the psychosocial risks, and professional risks. Then she went on to talk about how shift work participates in this disruption. She also presented best practices that she found from evidence. And note here, she didn't just stay in nursing when she went to her literature review, because pilots, other shift workers were valuable to her knowledge. They transferred to her topic, so she used them. That's just an aside. And then she summarized at the end of her literature review. Then she moved into saying, here's the methods that I'm going to use to study my research project. Now that's SK2, we're talking about, SQ2, we're talking about SK2 or a literature review at this point in time. So that's an example of what these headings look like. So in C of your paper, you want to introduce headings and say, presented in the following are 10 pieces of evidence on childhood obesity. They are organized like this. And then you make your headings. So this would become my first heading, and I would present what each person was telling on this evidence. I want to go back and do one thing here and show you how you present in-text citation. I'm going to use one of Mary's examples. So under disruption, shift work disorder, she says that this is characterized by persistent insomnia, trying to sleep, persistent sleepiness when trying to remain awake. And she uses an in-text citation of Drake. That is saying this is what Drake said. It's not a direct quote of what Drake said. It's a paraphrased word. Up here she has a sentence that she is citing actually 3 pieces of evidence to this one sentence. And if Mary were listening to this, I'd tell her, Mary, I bet you that those 3 pieces of evidence had more than one sentence, and you could probably dig into them a little bit more and separate this out and expand that part. she does this as well the next time actually has 4. So if you're ever tempted to throw 3, 4, 5 citations on one sentence, stop yourself and go back to that evidence and really scrub through it, because they probably say more that is valuable to us. This is one of my passions about a literature review and examining evidence, is that sometimes we miss what others have discovered. We ignore it, or we don't use it in our own setting, or we don't think about it in another way, and it doesn't grow. So to me, it's really important that evidence keep growing, and one of the ways is doing that is assuring that you're scrubbing through the evidence as diligently as you can. So speaking of scrubbing, that's why D is called out. D1, 2, and 3 force you to scrub your evidence for the factors that they say that influence the problem, the barriers to the problem or an intervention, and the best practices that they're calling out. This is what our evidence is telling us. So we use citation to back that up, and we're really forced to dig into it. You don't necessarily take these 3 subgroups under each of your topics forward into your literature review and capstone, but you certainly can. It would really force you to concentrate on each of your topic groups for these 3 things. That's a good literature review, and it assures that you've scrubbed and brought through the evidence. And notice in E it says, if you use sources, include all in-text citations and references. Well, there's no if about it here, because of course you're using sources. You're using 10, as well as you may have others that you used in your problem description. Then you'll definitely have the 10 that you're using for your organizational headings. So that is my quick webinar on SK2, the literature review. Thank you.